Can you just give us a little sense of what it was like to transition from, uh, more traditional on-stage physical theater to working in this completely remote and virtual space? What was that like for the two of you?
Well, first of all, we need to thank our performers and then of course you and Greg. It was a difficult and exciting process because the dancers and performance artists and sound artists that we have worked with, Michelle and I, in the DAP-Lab, we tend to be in a physical space in the studio, and we get to know each other quite intimately, and we sense our way through the evolution of the material, which includes the designing of the material and then the choreography and the sonic environment. And in this particular case, we had to relearn the process of preparing images and leitmotifs for the movement and the sound, and then
Oh,
um, hoping that our sound artist D. Kathleen would feel the scene and give us something to be involved in. And then Ju had to learn how to, I think, work within a very limited space of the green screen to find his locations and then interact with a dancer who was not there. Yeah, I mean, Michelle, you noticed it too. You spoke about the embedding. Can maybe Michelle, you can comment on that. The embedding in the green screen space was for
Mm,
us
mm,
totally new.
mm. Um, I think for me, though, the lack of touch was the most interesting thing, particularly because I do tend to work in a very tactile way with performers, and it's very much about how something feels, the palpability of it, how it influences the movements, and there's an interrelationship there between that which is touched and the way the movement might emerge in the performance space. And equally, in terms of the sounding, it's usually very much about a very physical presence, for me, in the way I've worked. So here, the fact that I couldn't touch was the first issue. But then understanding the real parameters that we were working within, it took some time understanding then, in terms of the green screen technologies, what kind of issues we might be facing in terms of the layerings. There was a lot of technical learning to do, as well as trying to develop a creative performance and to feel what the performers were feeling. I watched and I could see the learning, particularly with Ju, who's very present throughout. You could really understand the intelligence that was developing with Ju, and his relationship to this third space. And this is something I've commented on a lot with Johannes. It's been really a very enjoyable experience to watch that
Yeah,
knowledge
it's very
develop.
enjoyable and frustrating because sometimes we did not know what would happen in the experimentation, and maybe the performers can address this. But Kathleen D, with the sound and the live processing of her voice and creating the atmospheric environment was absolutely fabulous. But I agree with you. Ju had to feel the whole environment with this one small space, surrounding him,
Yeah,
and him
yeah.
with VR goggles, not even seeing where he was performing
yeah, yeah.
in the landscape. And we had very serious plans to deal with climate, plants, rivers,
Hmm.
water,
Hmm.
continents, and I think this was maybe too much to take on. I don't know, Randall.
Well, I think better to take on too much than not enough. That's my feeling. Well, it's been an interesting experience for Greg and I as well, because we have been working with artists who are, very acclimated to the physical theater and to be in the proximity with other performers and to be working in a studio environment and having staff around them to help support the whole thing, and now here we are putting the performers. The performers have to be their own technicians. They have to set up by themselves. They have to make sure everything's working. Their cameras, their microphones. It's a lot, and then of course they have to monitor themselves on a screen. I would like to ask our two performers to comment on this idea, which I think is the most challenging aspect of what we're doing, which is that you have to kind of almost have a out-of-body relationship with the stage. In other words, rather than being able to look around you to see the stage, you have to look at a monitor to see where you are on stage and to see where you are in proximity and relationship to the other performer. And that is incredibly difficult. So, Dee, do you want to start by commenting on what that was like for you?
Yeah. So first off, I'm not a trained dancer, so it's like a new thing for me as well. But also, I think it's really interesting. By the end, I realized the screen was what was hindering me. Like me focusing so much on what it looks like on the screen ended up taking away from performance enough that I had to forget the screen and just remember the space and imagine the space that I'm actually in.
So Dee, I think since it's a little difficult to understand you because of all the processing with your complicated setup, can you just give us a short demo? I'm going to turn your granular synthesis on, and can you give us a short demonstration of what you were doing during the performance?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm just going to comment on that. Thank you. So
talking with the plant.
Yeah, Dee was performing with instruments and with her voice, and she was running. This is an interesting technique that we were doing. Her voice is coming to me in my studio. It's then running through an audio patch that she wrote, and it's running in my studio, and it's doing all the transformation, the manipulation, the signal processing of the sound, and then we're sending it out to the audience. So it's kind of an interesting way of working when the performer is remote from where the processing, where the manipulation is taking place, which is in the studio. Here, I'm in Washington, D.C., and you're in London, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. I should know that by now, right? Now, Shu, can you also comment on this idea of having to watch you're a dancer and a choreographer, and you're used to working physically, in the space, and able to move your body in relation to what's around you. But now you had to do it all in conjunction with a screen, and both of you had to deal with the fact that I was controlling how big you were, where you were on stage. And so you were losing a lot of control, basically, to the system here. So, Shu, what was that like for you?
So I would like to thank for this opportunity, first of all, for all collaborators. And I have to say it was challenging for me. For this project, I need to have eyes around my body. It's not only eyes here, but eyes here, back on my body, everywhere. So I need to watch the monitors. I need to observe everything. The space with the green screen, also with the camera. So,
Sorry, I just lost. Wait 1 second. I'm trying to switch here, and okay, there we go. Yeah, maybe you could show us your setup and how you were working in your studio.
okay. Can you see? So this green screen. and the first monitor here, and the second monitor here, and the third one here. Yeah, so I need to have eyes everywhere to observe all this kind of thing. And the
Yeah.
second thing I think is about the relationships with the camera, with the monitor, with the green screen, with the laptop. So as a dancer, I really need to learn to feel through my dancing body. So I spent the 2 months to cultivate the relationships between all this device and my dancing body. When I perform in a theater or in set specific dance, so I can feel the nature, I can feel the spectators, I can feel the audiences. But now in my studio, so I only can feel the devices, the monitor, this kind of thing. So I spent a lot of time to cultivate the relationships, the emotions with these devices. Then I'm here. I got the feelings that I generate my movement, my choreography. Yeah.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
and both of you did masterful jobs, and coming from a place where this was really the first experience to what we finally did today is really quite extraordinary. Greg, I'm going to give you the last word, and I want, here's my question, which is that we began this project, a year and a half ago, and really in the throes of COVID, which was why we were able to get funding for this project, and to basically train artists to work in the telematic space, in the time of COVID as an alternative to not being able to work at all, right? So given all of that, and now we're hopefully coming out of COVID, I wanted to ask you, what impact do you think all this is going to have on the performing arts? Do you think this is a wave of the future? Do you think that artists are going to embrace this kind of performance? Or do you think that maybe it's just was a passing phase during the pandemic?
You're asking me that question?
Yes.
I
Well,
think that it's
yeah.
it's an interesting question, and we touched in on the aesthetics of these kinds of questions at multiple points, and you can see the result of those investigations by DAP-Lab. Congratulations, by the way. And it's difficult to talk about it as just a cinematic medium because it's also live, and we invest sense of space and depth. So, is it performance or is it performed cinematic aesthetic? And so, exactly how those two things correlate is really a tricky thing for the brain because it's so new and novel to be looking into this computer in order to see this performance experience. We're used to this as like a television. We're watching a TV. And then to invest that interaction and sense of space or 3 dimensions or kaleidoscopic or montage visual effects, it's such a huge palette.
Can I comment?
Yeah, Johannes,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
Michelle may differ, but I feel there is a problem with the highly technical demands that we faced. Not a problem as such, because we adapt and we adopt. But when I thought our piece will be an artistic exploration of river and flow, I was thinking, Greg, it is performance because it has to flow. And we don't quite know how the flow will impact us, also thinking through, feeling through the climate crisis. So when we worked on the technical cue sheets, it was for me causing anxiety because I realized that technical precision is counter to the aesthetic that we normally work with. I don't need the precision. I need flow. But I also realize the mixing that happens in lifetime is very, very complicated. So I don't know, Michelle. For me, it was a totally an anxious affair.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think one of the key differences is that in order to even not only just rehearse, but in order to even experiment, you have to have a full technical setup. It's not like you can just go into a studio and play around. The studio is in the cloud. The studio is a technological, construction. And so any kind of work that takes place in the telematic space has to be done on a very advanced technical level. And so it's kind of like, when you rehearse a piece with your company, and then at the last stage you go into the theater, and then you're working with the lighting person and the sound person and the scenic designer and so on. And then you get into the cues and all of that. Well, that has to start earlier in this process. It's a little painful, I agree. It's not like we enjoy it either, per se.
But we have worked in quite technical setups before. I mean, I've developed wearables for performance, and those wearables have to be developed in a relational sense. So for me, the technical was a key part of it. I think coming from a design background, maybe I see it a little bit differently, because I've always understood that we have to understand the technologies we're working with in order to create absolute freedom, and that in a way we needed longer because we were only just beginning to find our creative freedom within those technical
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so that's how I would view that.
Well, that's why this was really intended to be a workshop, an opportunity for the artist to explore this medium. And hopefully, the two of you, the four of you will go on to, maybe push these ideas further. On your own, or maybe you never will. I don't know.
We don't have your studio, Randall.
No.
I'm going back to nature, working only in organic environments. But it was a great experience, and I want to thank Ju and D. Kathleen for their stamina, their braveness. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank
Incredible.
everybody, and we have Johannes Berenger and Michelle Danjou, who are the co-directors of the DAP-Lab company based in London at Brunel University, and Shishu and D. Kathleen Egan, who are two performers. Thank you very much. You two are heroes, in my opinion, to have pushed through all of this, and of course my partner in crime, Gregory Kuhn, who we've been working together for nearly 40 years, believe it or not. Well, not 30 years, 30 years. I don't want to make it sound too old. But so Greg has been right there, when we've gone through so many different types of theater, and we've seen the whole evolution of the technology from the beginning of our careers, and it's been quite a journey, wouldn't you say, Greg?
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for your patience and your diligence, sticking through some difficult turns. And so thank you for your patience with me.
Thank you.
My gratitude.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Lovely to meet you all. What a gift.
Yeah.
And thanks for the audience to have tuned in today. Yeah. Thank you, audience. Thank you.
Yeah.